Hi, IBC family. This is Toni, and I have this week's word of encouragement. I want to reference a quote that the guest speaker over the weekend said about grace. He said, "Your spiritual growth can be measured by the level of amazement of God's grace." In Ephesians 2:8 and 9, God saved you by His grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. I don't know about you, but I'm thankful for God's grace. I'm thankful I don't have to earn His grace. I don't have to be good enough for His grace. It's something we can receive freely. Let's reflect on grace, and where would we be without it? We'd be empty, broken, bruised, shallow, helpless. We'd have fear in our life. We'd be in constant worry. There'd be no second chances. Kindness would disappear. We need grace in our lives every day. What about God's grace? I heard this phrase. I often think of God's grace as behind the beauty of creation. When we look all around and we see the trees and the water and the flowers, we see the diversity in people, we see the animals. I'm amazed by God's grace. His grace made us. God's grace sent Jesus. For God so loved the world, He gave Jesus. He put Jesus here on the earth. When you received salvation and the gift of the Holy Spirit, grace took over in your life. Before salvation, we were headed on a wrong path. Aren't we thankful for God's grace? I know many of you have stories about where you were before Jesus in your life and where you are now. Thank goodness for God's grace. Without grace, we wouldn't be able to meet Jesus or dwell with Him. This week I was reading in the Gospels. I came across the story of the Good Samaritan. You've heard it before. The Jewish man, he was traveling and he got attacked, left in a ditch to die. A priest walked by, he didn't help him. A temple worker walked by, he didn't help him. But then a despised Samaritan. Samaritans weren't very accepted back then. They were a multiracial person and just despised. He walked by and he had compassion on the man. He soothed his wounds with oil and wine. He put him on his own donkey. He took him to a place of safety. He stayed with him so he could make sure he'd be okay. He paid for him to stay an extra night so he can rest and heal. Have you ever thought of Jesus as the example of the Good Samaritan? Jesus didn't want to leave us destined for death, destined for hell, living in sin, hopeless, without grace. Jesus was rejected by so many people and still is today. He had compassion and He died on the cross. He paid for us to be healed and whole and restored. How grateful are we to receive God's grace? Let's continue to reflect on grace on a regular basis. Let's extend grace to others. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Jesus said, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness." All we have to do is surrender. We can say, "Jesus, on a daily basis, I can't do this life on my own. I need your help." That's the best prayer we can pray. Help me, Jesus. He can lead, guide, and direct us by the power of the Holy Spirit. Paul continued on to say, "So now I am glad to boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ can work through me." I hope you can take some time to read in the Bible and read and think about grace and about where we would be without His grace. It's a daily reflection. If you didn't get a chance to hear Joe Purcell, our speaker on the YouTube channel here, you can watch his sermons. They were so good. I hope you have a blessed rest of your week.